and this space to other cultures, other directors, and to have the possibility to, well, share experiences, because cinema is universal. The topics that we're going to see are not touch every one of us, and it's about humanity, and I think there's a lot more things that bring us together than separate us. So I'm very, very excited about this. So today we have Sebastian's film, Grace and Grit. And well, Sebastian, a lot of you might know them, some of you don't. So he is a screenwriter, director, and also an actor. And also it is a great honor to have Francis Fisher. Francis?
Hey, Francis!
And we have executive director, Aída Velasco. Thank you for joining us. You know, we need producers to have films, otherwise films wouldn't make it to the big screen. And well, as maybe you have read in the blur, this is a story based on a true story. It's the book by, let's see if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, it's
Ken Wilber.
Ken Wilber. And so he's a philosopher and mystic. Some of you might have read his books, some might not. I haven't, so I think I'm very excited to see his journey, all he went through with Grace. And without further ado, I'm going to give the mic to Sebastian. Thank you all for being here this evening.
Damas y caballeros, dicen por ahí que yo soy un malinchista porque yo nací en Inglaterra. Así que mi cuerpo es británico, pero mi corazón es latino.
¡Bravo!
Marca registrada, hecho en México, con Dios para siempre.
Ya te ganaste nuestro corazón.
I went to a Mexican school in South Texas after we moved from England, and I fell in love with the culture. And it wasn't just the amazing food, but it was afterwards I was thinking, what is this? And I thought, if you're in a relationship with someone from America or many countries and they tell you I love you, they mean it for a month, maybe a year, maybe a lifetime. But if you're with someone who's from Mexico and you say I love you, and they say it, they mean it not just for this lifetime, but the one after that and the one after that too. So I identified enormously with the culture, and I think about, most films come out and then they get less popular as time goes on. And this movie, as adapted from the book, is a true story, but it's becoming more popular every month, and particularly in Latin America and the Latin cultures and in Mexico. And I was wondering why that is, because we don't promote the movie down there at all. But I think it's because many audiences shy away from a movie that is experiential, it will stir people up. But this movie is very popular in those cultures because I think it identifies with individuals and with cultures who really are thinking about what are we doing here in this world? What is love? And how do we kind of live on past this sort of brief life of 50 or 100 years? With that sound, I'd like to remind you all to turn off your phones, please.
Yeah, sorry about that.
This movie is experiential, meaning that it's like a poetry, and so it takes time to kind of drop into it and experience it. So if you could refrain from using your phone, not just that you can have the best experience, but also so that everyone around you doesn't need to look at the light. The film runs an hour, 45 minutes. Everyone in the movie is depicts an actual individual in the world. You'll see some of in the credits, some of the individuals and the people next to the actors. And then Francis and Fisher and I will have a brief discussion and Q&A afterwards. So thank you all for joining us. I'd like to again thank Aída Velasco, my producing partner, for believing in this film from the beginning. And when I was adapting the screenplay from the book, when I put the book down, I was just crying, and I thought, what is it about this that I'm both devastated and uplifted? And it was the me here now that wants to attach to love and people and things in this life that was devastated. And yet it's the indelible me, that kind of the me behind me that lives on forever, that was totally liberated and excited and overjoyed. And the juxtaposition of those two things, which you might experience during the film throughout, I think was what excited me the most, right, as a filmmaker. And I'm deeply grateful to Francis Fisher because, Francis, you were on this with me from a very long time ago, and you were saying, Sebastian, and just, I'm crying my eyes out. I don't want to turn the next page because I know what's coming, this kind of thing. So thank you so much. Yeah. All right, so welcome you guys, and thank you for being here. All the fight scenes.
Well, what can I say after this? Well, congratulations. Mil felicitaciones. It was very, very moving, very, very touching. And it's, you can tell, they were not just the heart, the soul. And I would like to start by asking you, Sebastian, so does Ken Wilber agree with the film? Has he seen it? Were you in touch with him through the whole process of filming?
There were many producers that came before me, big companies to make it, and I think that it was a love story and sort of an illness story. But then I think at the right moment, then I read the book and I was like devastated and uplifted simultaneously, and I thought, well, the plot is the illness, boy meets girl, they come together, they fall apart, they get back together, she dies at the end, right? But really it's a story about transcendence. And I was writing at the time on the Huffington Post, sort of psychology and such, and then was introduced with Ken Wilber, and I had no idea that I would be part of this film. We just sort of became friends, and I think that he respected me and understood, because I referenced him so much, that I was familiar with his voice and his fingerprint. So then when the time sort of came, I thought, you know, this has got to be made into a movie. Why isn't this happening? And he said, like, 15 years people have been trying to do it, but they haven't really figured out how to do it. And so then he trusted me completely. And he never asked any questions, never, just gave me total faith and approval. So then when we finished it, I wanted to watch it in a room with him, so I flew to Denver, where he lives now, and we watched it together. And he, like this audience, laughed a lot and cried a bit, and a couple other people were in the room. So, but he loved it. He gave it a very long review that's online about that it touched it, and he was deeply grateful for Mena and for Stuart and for Francis as well.
And I thought Stuart literally just looks like him. It's incredible, the resemblance. I think whoever did the casting did a great job. And yeah, I thought the casting was amazing. Of course, Francis too. But I thought her expression just tells you so much. I think her is such an amazing actress, because just by looking into her eyes, you can feel all that emotion, and she transmits so much. She's such a great actress, and you did a great job as a mom.
I was comic relief. You know, the thing that I wanted to remark upon, because I've seen this movie a few times over the years, just letting us witness and experience that last scene is so powerful. Most movies would cut away a lot earlier, and this time the feeling of it was different for me, because did you guys see the two little dogs in my scenes? They're my dogs, and one of them passed recently. So I want all the outtakes. I want to see all the raw footage that you haven't.
He was so difficult as an actor. He wanted to raise and all those things, but we had to put him in the picture. Francis won't do it without you, Batman. But we'll get those.
But just that last scene of actually watching, and she so beautifully did it, and then to turn around on Stuart, and he allowed us to be with him. I mean, I was right there. I'm sure you all were too. Just going through, because there was enough time to do it without going on to something else. So,
thank you for that. When I think about film, for me, if I'm in a film for an hour and a half or 2 hours, I want to have an intellectual response, and I also want to have an emotional response. And like Mel Gibson would talk about, entertain, educate, and enlighten. You have to entertain. If you can educate, that's great. If you can enlighten, then you're really doing the job. And I thought there's really not a death scene that I've ever seen that felt real to me, having held someone who dies, having seen enough of death, that I didn't feel, like you're saying, it was cut away. And I feel like the process is experiential, that we want to be transformed in some way. So that was really important to me. And in her journals, when I adapted the screenplay from the book and from her journals, some of the scenes, like that particular scene, was almost verbatim, from her journals and from his. And to speak about Stuart, Francis was on very early and was so supportive all the way. I loved the script. We had done a documentary before and been friends, so she believed in me as well. And then we cast Mena. Mena was excited, knowing that she was going to be also opposite Francis. And then when it came to Ken, it was very tough to cast. And so then finally I came in contact with Stuart, and he was going through this period that was very emotional in his life, and so he had this sort of well to pull from, which is demanding. And tons of actors who I respected and admired my whole life sort of were vying for the role and interested in it, and we were exploring it. And Stuart at the time had long hair down to here, and so no one thought that he looked like Ken Wilber, and it was important to me not to do lookalikes, but just that the interiors of the characters were similar. And so for Mena and Stuart, their interiors were both the same. It didn't matter to me if they looked like them physically at all. So then the first day of filming, Stuart arrives on set. He and I had met a few times before that, and he had long hair down to here. He's got 5 years of hair or something. And I never told him that he's going to need to shave his head. And his agent at one point had called and said, "Can we get potentially, makeup to do this thing?" And I said, "Sure." And that's like a $30,000 rig, right, to do the hair, shave. And I thought, he's not going to do it, but I don't want to get in a transactional relationship with the actors, because ultimately they're going to trust me, that I'm showing up ultimately once we start filming as an artist, and they are too. So Stuart showed up, and I went in the room. It was like 4:50 a.m. or something. First shot's up at like 5:45 or something like that, 6. And everyone's like outside, like saying, do you want to go in? I was like, no, I don't want to go in and look at the makeup yet, because I want to be sure that I buy it. I don't want to wait till the last minute. So then it was like a few minutes before our first shot, and 20 minutes before our first shot, and I walked in. I didn't like it, so I asked everyone to clear the room, and I just sat down with Stuart, and it didn't look great. It looked okay, but at this film, like, we're way up in there.
Oh my God.
Right, we're like, it was so close. Like, the makeup was good enough, but not for what we were going to be doing. And so then I just sat down with him, and he could feel, I didn't want to tell him anything. I wanted him to come up with the idea. And so I just looked at him, he said, "What do you think?" I said, "What do you think?" And then I picked up a book by Ken Wilber, because Ken Wilber books everywhere, and I picked up a mirror, and I said, like, this is so much more important than me. This is going to live on way beyond us. This is one of the most prolific authors in the history of humanity. What are we doing here? And then he looked at me, and he looked at the book, and he goes, "I'll be right back." And he went down and he shaved his head.
Oh, thank God.
Now, what was amazing is then he comes up on set, and everyone's been studying Ken Wilber's face, that everyone went nuts. This is like this synchronicity, and everyone was in sort of awe, like, oh my God, it's identical. The chin, the ears, the eyebrows, the nose, the mouth. And my producing partner said, "What did you say to him?" I said, "I didn't say anything."
That's good direction.
Wow, that's incredible. There's so much, like you say, it's quite transcendental, and it's also, there's a lot about the soul, and there's also about, the suffering, and we all come to suffering to this earth. But also I really like the readings of Ken Wilber in a way, and how they go through the whole process with that consciousness, being very, very conscious of what they're going through, and up to the end. And when she says, it's it, time has come. So are you what conscious person, mystical person, spiritual person?
I don't know, Francis, am I?
Well, you have to be spiritual to make a movie like this, and there are all levels of it, we all are, and just how much you're willing to dive in.
I read, Ken's books are really tough reads, and I fell in love with his books many years ago, and I read all of them, almost, and they're really tough, slow reads, and I was never interested in making, like, even Grace and Grit, I didn't read it until late in the works with him. And then I was making a documentary at the time called Awakening World, which is distributed by Beyond Words, which Francis is in. That was the first project we did together, and Ken Wilber gave me an interview. I really wanted to interview, I really wanted to meet him. He's like impossible to meet. So I suppose in short, the answer is I'd read all of his stuff, and then I read Grace and Grit late, and then he and I met just because I was interested in consciousness. Like, I was so fascinated that I felt like I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for his voice, that he was such a huge impact on my life. So then when Grace and Grit came around and I thought, this has got to be a movie, I thought to myself, I owe this man my life. And so I will take on this duty and carry this torch of making this. And I think he felt that, and so, it was like, okay, he's the guy for it.
I have one last question because I want the audience, give the opportunity to the audience. The music is fantastic, and I think the music carries the whole film and takes us really to some very deep places and profound places, and also, it carries the whole place. So tell us about it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Kim and Catherine Kluge, who scored the film with me, I think they used to run the symphony in San Francisco, and they're brilliant musicians, a couple, and they came down to Los Angeles, and they each play a dozen instruments, and she's got this amazing operatic voice.
It's her voice.
Yeah, it's her voice, and they came down, and they had never done a movie before, and then Martin Scorsese heard their stuff and was like, you have to do my movie Silence, which came out a few years ago, and it's an epic. Also, and so that was their first movie, and then I think they went on to do a movie after Scorsese was with Michael Mann, and then so they had never done a movie before, but they had done these, just sort of fell into these epics, right? So they were neighbors with my editor, and we were editing 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. for many months, and then he said, listen, your whole temp score is from Silence, and the people who did that are my neighbors. I want to invite them over to watch a rough assembly. So they came over, and they, watched like an hour of the film. They said, listen, you can't afford us, but we want to do this picture. We feel like it's important and it's going to live on, and we want to do it. So I'm hugely humbled and grateful for them, because the music is so powerful on so many levels.
Wow. Just happened to live next door. That's miraculous, right?
Synchronicity.
Yeah.
So whoever has questions, please raise your hands, introduce yourselves, and then we'll pass the mic. Say to whom you direct your question.
Well, I guess to Sebastian. My name is Fanka Tapia, and I'm an actor/producer, and I love that I just told you when I met you outside that you are a multi/filmmaker, like actor/producer/ and everything. I want to talk about the cinematography. It started a little bit like a documentary style. I felt with the narrative, the way that she was narrating, and then also some scenes that were like shaking the camera a little bit, so it made me feel that I'm walking with her. Like the point of view from the spectator was almost, I felt like her. So I assumed that was in purpose. So how did you work with them? How did you communicate with your cameraman?
It's a great question. I appreciate it. So as a director, I've really got to have some sort of specialty in every department, right? From acting to lenses to cinematography to makeup to wardrobe to set design to etc. But the head of that department knows more than me, and so my job is to collaborate with a symphony and really allow these components to shine. So the DP, Shannon Liljestrand, we've done 4 projects together, and so we have a first-hand, like an intuitive kind of relationship already. And I think when we were deciding what lenses to use and how to shoot it, we watch 20, 30 movies or something together, and we're going on location scouting, so we're a lot of time together during that period. And I thought everything should be handheld for exactly the reason that you brought up, that it's so intimate because the plot is so simple in this film. Yeah. But the theme is the internal, right? Because she goes from student, she's in awe of him, to teacher. In the end, she becomes his teacher ultimately. That he goes from teacher to student. That all these things he learns in his relationship with her that he's written about, he has to embody, right? And then she also goes from doing, like trying to get the guy, beat the thing, to being, right, which she calls passionate equanimity. And he goes from head to heart, right? Like she never sees him cry in the whole movie, right? In the whole depiction, he cries 3 times.
Yeah.
Right, once alone in the room, and then once on the roof alone, and then in the end after she passes, right? Because he has to stay strong for her. And so I thought the sensitivity around that requires this deep, you know, and then we chose the lenses, similar lenses to what Terrence Malick shot the Tree of Life on. I really like that a lot. But like, you know, for example, when they're under the sheets, one of the things that Malick does really well is sort of bend time. And so I wanted to start out making it very real. And then kind of all of a sudden, next thing you know whether you're going forward or backwards, because that's how we experience each other, and that's how we experience life, that it's, you know, visceral instead of chronological, more so. When we were under the sheets, when she's going in for her first procedure and she's kind of remembering back, and one of my producing partners was like, listen, this needs to go later. And I was like, no, the time doesn't matter. Like, this is what she's experiencing on a feeling level internally. But when we shot that, we're underneath the sheets, you know, and I'm on the thing, and my DP's in there with Stuart and Mena, and I'm hearing, ow, oh, damn, you hit me in the head, boom, ow, you know, because it's so right up in there. So that was how we choreographed. And then ultimately the final stick of that is I like to do everything really, I do a whole day just with my DP and with my AD, and I act out the entire script, every character, so that we know exactly what we're shooting, what lens, and how we're going to go about it, because things are going to happen on set. We need to be prepared for that. So, thank you.
There is money and then Henry.
Thank you. Yes, congratulations, magnificent masterpiece. My name is Manny Valentine. I'm also in the movie industry, the music industry, you know, jack of all trades in the industry, but I couldn't help but realize, it hit me that the story, it's been about 50 years almost, that a story that I once saw became reality in this movie. But in a different perspective, it's more reality, it's more intentional, it's more documented, specifically with the data from the disease, you know, the doctors and all the information that is now palpable for anybody to see and to experience. And I'm talking about Love Story. Ali McGraw and Ryan O'Neal. It's sort of like it's almost the same path, the same story, but that was a make-believe. And this story finally touched all of us with the reality of the disease, and I just felt overwhelmed and very moved. So that was just a commentary. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, and your intuition is right on point. The final credit in this movie, in this special thanks, is Robert Evans. It's Bob Evans, the kid stays in the picture, who made Love Story, and he was a mentor for me for a long time. And when I first optioned this, I watched 2 love stories a night for a month, right? So it was like, people were like, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, well, I'm gonna watch Titanic at 6, and at 9 o'clock we're gonna have dinner, and then I'm gonna watch The Notebook. And all my friends who were men were like, oh my God. My living room was packed with women by the end of the month. It was great. So I watched Love Story, you know, because the choreography of that from the character development was very specific, and it was also the movie that saved Paramount, right? So the first person I went to go see right after I got the option was Bob Evans. And I sat on his bed and we talked, because he ran Paramount from basically his bedroom. And he said, you know, it didn't test well. He says, and then we went back in Love Story, we took Ryan and Alan, we shot all those scenes in the snow, and we added the music in there, and then all of a sudden it tested great. And he's like, so if you can, Sebastian, shoot as much as you can outside. And so it was from that I sort of paraphrased Ken Wilber and Treya Wilber's dreams, and I put her on the hill searching, and she ends up in the ocean, and him under the ocean, and he ends up looking up at the stars, so that they find each other in this sort of that kind of world. But that movie was important for me, and Bob Evans has been huge on that too. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Sebastian. This is for you. I'm Henry. I'm Aída's husband. I absolutely.
Congratulations.
Yeah, she's the other half of my soul. It was a beautiful movie. It was really extraordinary to watch. And one of the things that Aída just mentioned, that was a kind of a movie about consciousness, which this is what she thought. And I was so I came with a really intrigued to see how someone would write a movie about consciousness. There was a moment in the movie when he touches her for the first time, and you film something. It's like almost like an X-ray, right? It's the inner touching of their souls, I guess. And I just wondered if you could talk a bit more about that scene, and in a sense, the way that you set about, and I think you sort of answered this in the previous question, but the way you sort of went about kind of depicting in film that ineffable thing, which is consciousness.
Yeah, thank you for that. When I was reading her journals and I was reading the book and revisiting that, and she described what they talked about love at first touch, and they both talk about in their journals, they were both literally after they met, they had hugged in the kitchen just like that, and then they both went home and journaled just like they did, and I read, a lot of that stuff is verbatim too from their journals, and she was like, gosh, I didn't know him, and like I put my head on his chest, and like all of a sudden my eyes are closed, and I felt like her words were, I felt like I was floating in an ocean, like I was just all of a sudden inside, beyond, and holding this other being transcendentally, and he had written very much the same experience in his journals. I thought, what is that? So I actually took the love scene later, where they're outside and they're sort of making out, and they're going to have sex. It feels like, and I did the negative of that because I thought that was this sort of very primal, erotic push, and I like to do as many payoffs later, earlier in the film, to give it a through line, so that we feel those synchronicities as we do in our own lives. Like so many things are synchronistic. And then it was abstract enough that I felt, okay, that's really on a feeling level. And I kept Mena's breath in there, like her actual breath. Right, I wanted to do a lot of that so that it really sort of embodied that visceral sense. Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions from? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Julia. I'm just an old friend of Sebastian's, but I was going to share this with you privately, but I figured my heart is so open for this film, I'll just share with everybody. I just want to thank you, first of all, for having me tonight. This feels really, really, I was supposed to be here. I haven't actually left the house after 5 o'clock for 4.5 years. I'm a sole parent to a little boy who's almost 4 now. And certainly haven't seen a movie in a very long time, and I needed this, not just for the obvious, but a few weeks after my son was born in October 2020, I lost my mom to breast cancer, and it was very kind of sudden, and I actually haven't even had a chance to, since I had my son and as a sole parent from the get-go, I haven't had a chance to even look into what her experience was like. My mom and I were actually estranged for a couple years prior to her passing. So it was really major for me to see this, and I want to just thank you all, and also always been a great admirer of your work as well. The cast was perfect, the music was perfect. It was really, really special, and I'm so proud of you. And just thank you very much. I could go on, but I'm still trying to digest it all, but this was really important for me, and that's the power of movies. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. This film is for you, then. In that same way, I felt the same when I read the book. That I put it down, and part of me was totally uplifted by the sort of mechanism that is transcendental about love, that it goes on. Like, we're here for this brief moment, it goes on. And the other part of me was devastated because I want to keep participating in this. And it's going to go. And so I want to capture every moment with as much presence that I possibly can. And that was really sad to this. So thank you. This is absolutely, this is absolutely you. You know, when we screened this in Sedona, it was one of the first festivals that opened up. So many people in Sedona had experienced this with their husband or wife, right? That it skewed a lot older, and so many men and women in the audience was said, "Hey, my husband and wife died in my arms, and this was pretty close." And then that love somehow has transfused or been transmuted into my current relationship that makes it even more alive. And I thought that's the hope part, right? That's the hope part, like this thing that you bring up with your mother that lives now through you and your son. Yeah. Thank you.
There's a question here at the front. Hi, my name is Yolanda, and what I like the fact that you had them arguing, you know, because Dr. Kubler-Ross had the 5 stages of acceptance of death, and your film demonstrates that to your whole audience, to the final moment that she is totally accepting of it, and she finds peace. And I've had several people die in my arms where their family never came, and I'll tell you, it's a beautiful thing to watch that person take that last breath. You know, I would come home not feeling angry because I had an extra long shift that I worked 16 hours instead of 12, but I had that moment that I helped someone transition into that next life, and you showed it perfectly. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you so much. I think part of the reason the movie didn't get made before me, so many people were trying to tell a story that was plot-driven, and that for me, with my history in psychology and philosophy, what interested me most is exactly what you're saying, right? And these stages of grief and the stages of love also, you know, articulated through. And with this, I thought, all right, the 5 stages of love for me, as I kind of choreographed this film, was romantic, passionate, courageous, selfless, and then transcendent. Yeah, and I wanted to really hit those, you know, stages so that everyone would light up at some point there. Yeah. Thank you for what you do too.
Oh, that was years ago. I'm retired now.
Well, we are affected because we're actors. And
How do you manage to go over
we
it?
want to do that. We want to experience what's, you know, to put on the shoes of another person and live what they're living is something that actors, I don't know why we want to do it, but we do. And I think it's because ultimately, if I get a film like this, ultimately you are able to transcend and come through the screen and touch the people in the audience, which is the connection. It's, you know, why we want to do it. I've seen, like I said, I've seen this movie and I'm still crying. You know, I can't wait to call Mena and go, you were better this time.
I think also the experience, right, that compassion touches all surfaces the same, right? Like, compassion is not just for my dog or my lover or my family or my friend, it's also for my enemy. If the compassion deepens in me, and this is really that kind of perennial sense that the best thing I can do for the world is work on me, right? And so this film, I feel like, is a practice in that, or was a practice in that for me, and that I think that that's very much the actor's journey as well, that it's this idea of there's this fire inside of me, I want to make the world a better place, I'm going to embody the fire of all these other individuals, lovers, killers, heroes, slaves, etc., because I want to touch the world. And in doing that, show up then in the world in a way to be more tender and more compassionate, more sensitive, but it requires this now more courage, right? Because all of a sudden the lights are turned up so bright and the sound is so loud everywhere you go, right? I mean, everyone who's here tonight just by being here, you're saying, okay, I'm setting out for this. And I liked the way you opened up the question tonight by saying to tolerate this film, right? And it's very much that the reason we're here tonight is because this is very popular in Latin countries, in Mexico, and in America. It's 97% on Amazon, Rotten Tomatoes, etc., and Apple. But it's not hugely watched, where it's hugely watched in Latin America, because people want to get stirred up. So thank you for that, and thank you for also having the empathy to apply it to your own self and your relationship with this generous man who you're with, in the way that Ken was sort of crucified and resurrected through his experience with her. So thank you. Yeah. One more?
Okay, why don't we take more? Six.
Do both questions at the same
I have a
time.
pretty good voice. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Now, really, what a beautiful watch, man, and thank you for the invitation here. Really, really happy to see the experience that you're able to convey through the picture. There's a near claustrophobia that happens with these characters where you want to get out, but the performances are so strong that I'm stuck drawn in. So as a filmmaker and having worked with Mena personally, we obviously are both mutual friends with Mena, her performances, I just texted her, like, it's so visceral and it's so guttural. And as an actor, I know I only have so many tear ducts to give. As actors, we know that. So the question I have is, when you're working with this, it's really all in the timing of the rehearsal, of delivering the line, to know when you can get that performance, right? So I'd love to hear from you, when you're preparing for these particular very guttural moments, what are some of the things and some of the exercises that you had to go through to be able to find and create that honesty through the lens when you're speaking?
Great question.
Yeah, greatly appreciate the question. I don't do rehearsal. I rehearse choreography, so like a chase scene in a car or a fight scene, like the fight scene here, we prep ahead. But the other stuff I don't, because the actors, by the time we're there, I already know they're the people. And for me, it's important to cast archetypally, right? So that the interior structures of the individual match the person on the screen. So like Mel Gibson, when he's on the screen, he's that guy in Braveheart. Like, he is William Wallace, or like Colin Farrell in the Alexander film. Like, he's that guy. And so when Mena and I, first met, we were working. I was opposite her as an actor on another film, and I was just like, "This is the girl." I was just on it. This is the girl. And then I asked my producing partner. I was like, "How is it with her?" And she's like, "She's amazing." And then she loved the script, her manager loved the script, so she and I met for tea, and she came in and she cried 3 times in the meeting, right? And she showed up sipping a coconut with a straw, and I was just like, and her wedding, she had just been married, and her wedding was very similar to Ken and Treya's, and she was like, I have to do this, and I knew when I wrote it, like, the woman who's gonna play that just has to do it. It's that's what I'm looking for. And so when we met, I knew. And then the next step for me was, in terms of that timing, was to give her faith, because I'm going to push her to the limit. My mission is to make everyone fall in love with you, to make everyone identify with you, to make everyone feel seen by you and their own experiences of beauty and tripping and falling and standing back up. And so she had that faith in me and trusted me on every level, and so she was able to just go there, and it was explosive and powerful. I'm so grateful that we found each other to make this. And Ken, I think, felt the same way enormously. Yeah, thanks for that.
I cried several times.
How many takes did you do of the kitchen scene? That's probably what you want to know too. And when did you roll camera?
Oh, that's such a great question. The kitchen scene where he doesn't tell her, and then she finds out by looking at him, and she rips the kitchen up. 1 take, no coverage, no backups. Because we shot it.
Wow.
Thank you for that, because we shot it, and then I was like, moving on. And my AD was like,
Guts were out. Her guts were out.
it was so real, it was so there. And what you were saying also about, how do you, because it's effective, right? Like, Mena's really crying, she's really devastated, it's really all her cells, she's that person at that moment. And I knew, we checked the gate, everything. I was like, no, we're moving on. Let's go. We're going to need time on another scene. One take only. And it was interesting, that particular take when we were in the edit, Mena was like so crying, so alive, and that at the end when I was in the edit and in Foley with my editor, she had we had a boom, and then we had her mic here, and he was like, you hear that? And that her heartbeat was like, and he's like, it's not very clean. Let me pull that out. And I go, no, we're gonna keep that in there. He goes, well, if we're gonna keep it in there, let me replace it with something cleaner. And I said, no, it's this Zen quality. I want her, if that's what she's feeling, nothing can articulate on a just subtle level what's happening through her heartbeat in that microphone. I want to keep that. So, thanks.
Wow. Watch it again.
Yeah.
Listen.
One more.
Okay, this is the last question.
Hi, that was so difficult to watch. Thank you. And I just want to give so much gratitude for our health and just taking care of ourselves and for our love. That's truly what I got out of this. And just it just made me want to truly fucking live while we're here.
Yeah.
With this beautiful life that we have been gifted. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. I felt the same when I read the book. Yeah, I felt the same. And I think that Treya Wilber, when she wrote her journals and then gave them to Ken for him to transcribe into a book after she passed, I think that she's lighting up hearing that come from you, because I think that was very much her mission in writing those journals. Thank you.
We can't hear you.
Wow, it was amazing. It was wonderful. I was just trying to remember the last line of the film when she said, "Do you know the last?"
Well, she says, "You're my champion," and she buzzes, and then when the water, the two drops hit the ocean, which is the sort of them meeting and beyond, is, will you find me? I promise I'll find you. I promise. Because that was how they first met.
Oh yeah, no,
I promise
and I
I'll
was
find you.
thinking about the life.
Because I can no longer pay attention to, because I
To
can no
death.
longer avoid death, I have to pay more attention to
Yeah,
life.
that line, man, oh.
So let's pay more attention to life.
Because in the U.S. audiences are very meticulous, and so many people tonight have expressed it's challenging to watch, but it is like at the end there's like this release. If you would share any of your thoughts on Amazon or Apple, it makes a big difference for a film like this to get seen, and it's getting more popular, but it really does, because viewers who write that, it definitely bumps up so that other people will see it. It would mean a lot to all of us to make the world more compassionate. So thank you guys for coming.
So it's available on Apple and
Apple
Amazon?
and Amazon, yeah.
So before we close, I want to say thank you to Oscar Lainez, who's our producer.
Yay!
So
We have also Steve Martini, who's an actor in the film, is here. Steve. He was a big Ken Wilber reader, and we met through those channels. And then I said, you have to play this role. So, and I want to thank the Mexican Consulate and you guys so much for hosting this.
thank you for coming. This is for the audience. So without you, there's no cinema.